So in the last little while, I've done a number of videos that look at different options, both retail and DIY, that allow you to make use of smart cards to have digital backups of your recovery seeds that can both be redundant, so you can have multiple copies of them, but still be secure, even having different pins for different sets of backups you maybe store with different people. And in this video, I'm just going to be running through how to use the new recovery key from Ledger. This is basically one that I got for free because I had bought a Ledger Flex earlier on and covered this in my previous video here. And this is a good place to say if you're someone who bought a Ledger Flex or a Ledger Stax, you have until August 30 to pick up one of these for free. You just have to pay for postage. So if you have picked up one of these two devices in the last little while and you haven't picked up your recovery key, get on that quickly. But let's get into it. And if you haven't already done so, hit subscribe. That way you can stay in the loop for content I make to help you find your way in the crazy and often hostile environment that is cryptocurrency. Okay, so this is what you get. It's pretty straightforward, and it just has a note here saying that this is only for use with Ledger touchscreen wallets. So basically that means because this is NFC, you need to use it with either a Ledger Flex or a Ledger Stax. If you have one of these smaller Ledger models, like a Ledger Nano X or a Nano S Plus or even an old Ledger Nano S, this will not work. All right, so let's open it up. So basically we just open this up. There we go. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. This is everything that comes in the box. And actually, I'm curious to see if this little holder, it looks silvery, so this might actually be an RFID blocking sleeve. So let's just quickly have a look now. If I chuck that on there, yep, we can see this turn green and here it beeps, so that's worked. So if I just put this in there, yeah, okay, so that's nice. So this actual little sleeve that it comes in is actually a nice little RFID blocking sleeve as well. So that is handy, and there's room on there to put a label on it. So we'll just follow the bouncing ball in terms of the documentation. Takes us to this page here. If I click that, it just scrolls down. So the important thing to note here is we're going to be running a fairly recent firmware on our Ledger Flex device. We can just upgrade that using Ledger Live. Turn on your Ledger device, tap settings, follow instructions on the touchscreen. That is it. Well, let's give that a go. Here, I have a Ledger Flex. We'll put the case to the side as well. And we'll just unlock this. I've just got the pin set to 1, 2, 3, 4 on this one. Okay, so if I click the little cog, and I say Ledger Recovery Key, so remove the sleeve and hold it on the back. Oh, there we go. Keep holding recovery key in place. Bang. Set up your recovery key. ID 188430. Make sure this ID matches the one printed on the back. So I'll say start setup. Now, for security, re-enter the pin of this Ledger Flex. So okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. To prevent unauthorized access, Ledger recovery key uses pin protection. Choose 4 to 8 digits. Ah, this is very nice. Entering it 3 times will wipe it. Okay, so basically choose a 4 to 8 digit pin for your recovery key. And the important thing to note is that the pin for this recovery key does not have to be the same as the pin for this Ledger device. And the key thing here is you can actually create multiple backups of your seed on these Ledger recovery key devices, each with different pins. So I'll just set the pin for this device to be 0000. Let's see if it accepts it. Yep, 0000, just for the demo. Obviously you want something a bit more complicated than that. Next, create your backup on your Ledger recovery key. Tap to continue. Create your backup, hold it to the back of the Flex. Technical error. Okay. Let's try again. Put it on the desk, I won't touch it this time. The question is, where's the sweet spot? Let's just slide the whole thing right under. Okay, so I've just got the whole thing under there this time. So we'll do the pin for our Ledger Flex. Yep, I understand. 0000, go. 0, 0, 0, 0, go. No, let's not touch. There we go, backup created. Didn't look as though it was going to work, but it did. So backup created on your Ledger recovery key. Tap to continue. Your recovery key is like a spare key used to recover if your Ledger device your current one is lost, stolen, or replaced. Make sure you keep your written recovery phrase safe. You'll need it in case your Ledger recovery key is lost or damaged, or you forget the PIN. Tap to continue. Let's name it now. Let's give it a name. I'll just call it demo. Say confirm name. Enter my recovery keys PIN. I set that to be 0, 0, 0, 0. Hold to the back of the flex. There we go. This is your recovery key. So now this recovery key stores a copy of the 24-word seed that is on this ledger. And one thing that's actually worth pointing out that is very good here is that these recovery keys actually provide a mechanism to be able to create a new backup from your Ledger device if you have lost the old one. You know, sometimes when I'm talking to people, when I'm doing recoveries and stuff or consultations, some people will still have a working hardware wallet, but they will have lost their backup. And you know, obviously it's a very unsafe situation to have a hardware wallet without a working backup, but this product is actually quite good in that you could create a new backup even if you lost your old one. And it's important to say this is actually a change in terms of how devices like Ledgers behave, in that previously the only time you could ever get the recovery seed out was when you initially set the device up. There are plenty of other hardware wallets on the market. It'll just show you the seed words again as many times as you like, and the ability just to securely back it up onto a smart card, in my opinion, is at least quite a good compromise. So the question is, if I click Ledger recovery key, what else can we do now that we've set it up? Adjust the position as shown and keep on holding. Okay, so it looks like the sweet spot is actually with the card sticking about halfway out the top, like that. Okay, that works better. Unlock to manage. So the card pin for this card was 0, 0, 0, 0. Yeah, that's working much faster and better. So yeah, the sweet spot is definitely with the card just sort of sticking halfway out like that. So that is the one. We can see the name that I gave before. We can see, oh, that's nice. So it actually tells us the backup on this card belongs to this Ledger Flex, which is pretty cool. What's that up there? Oh yes, that tells us the recovery key firmware version. It is important to say the firmware on these recovery keys is actually upgradable. So we'll talk more about that later. And if I say manage recovery key, there we go. So I can do all of these things in here. So I can change the name, I can change the PIN to be something else, or I can just factory reset this device and put a new seed on there if I want. So that is all very good. The one question I've got is, does this have any capacity to store a passphrase? The answer is probably no. Now, the thing I'm curious to see is whether this will still detect that the seed on here matches what's on here, because as I covered in my old video on Reset, Recover and Verify Ledger Nano X, the recovery check feature actually will not work correctly if you have a passphrase set. So I'm curious to see if this is clever enough to match that we have the same one. Oh, well, that's good. So even if you have a passphrase active, it's still clever enough to know that you have the correct recovery phrase on the recovery key. So that is very good. So the important thing to be clear about is if you are using a BIP39 passphrase, it is not stored on the recovery key. These Ledger recovery keys are basically just a digital secure version of your 24-word seed, and they do not store your passphrase. So it's very important that you understand that if you are using a BIP39 passphrase, that is effectively part of your seed phrase that you must store, and if you lose it, you will not be able to regain access to your funds. So again, passphrase is definitely an advanced feature. If you're not using BIP39 passphrase, don't worry about it. So we'll run through how to make a backup from the Ledger Flex onto the recovery key. So we'll wipe the Ledger Flex and just run through the workflow for restoring a seed back onto the device from the smart card. So I'll just get this pin wrong a couple of times. Yep. 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 Bzz. There we go. Resetting. Okay, tap to continue. Ledger Flex, there you go. So this workflow is exactly the same as what you would normally expect at this point. So I'll just say set up without Ledger Live. I'll just skip Ledger Live because it's already set up in there. I have to set a name, but I'll do that later. And then we also have to set a pin. So I'll set this back to 1, 2, 3, whoop, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pin set. Okay, so basically now we get our options. So if this were a brand new device, you'd choose set up as a new ledger. And basically it'll run through generating us a recovery seed and offer to back it up onto there once that is done. But what we'll do instead is we'll say restore access to assets. And I will say a ledger recovery key. Yep, need the pin. I understand. So yes, that's an important warning. If you ever get one of these recovery keys and has a preset pin or has been set up for you, you are about to be scammed. These devices should only ever be something you set the pin and you set it up yourself, unless it's some sort of inheritance situation. So, connection timed out. All right, let's just say try again. There we go. Make sure this ID matches what's on the key. Start restore. Enter your recovery key's pin. So I set the pin to be 0000 on the recovery key. Restored from backup. Huh. Now, that is extremely interesting. Now, if you were just paying very close attention, you might have just noticed that when we restored the seed onto this device using the recovery seed, it didn't actually show us the 24 words. It simply put them straight from here onto here without showing them on the screen at all. And this is really clever in that, just like I demonstrated with my video on using a Seed Signer Plus SATA chip, back in February last year, the key thing here is you could actually restore your recovery seed from one of these recovery key devices onto your ledger, even with a security camera like looking over your shoulder, and they would not actually be able to gain any information about your recovery seed or anything like that, just from what is on the screen. It is important to say that if you are in a situation where you have lost your 24-word seed written backup, and the only backup you have is one of these, it's not actually possible at this time to be able to get your 24 words back from this device, at least from what I can see right here. Meaning that while these could be really helpful to sort of get you out of a spot where you may not have any backups at all, maybe I'm old school, but I still think it is a really good idea to actually still have a written backup somewhere in some sort of analog or non-perishable medium, whether that's written down on paper, stamped in steel, or something like that. These are brilliant and help to make things like travel, storage in insecure locations much easier, or even making a new backup if you've lost your old one as a stopgap. But I still think these complement analog backups rather than completely replace them. But either way, I'm very impressed. Anyway, that was pretty quick and painless. So basically our Ledger Live has our 24-word seed on there and is ready to go. You'll need to obviously install any apps that you have on there in Ledger Live. So that is all pretty straightforward. So the only thing that we'll also just mention, this demo, is recovery or reset. So basically we could get the pin wrong 3 times, that'll wipe it, or we can just reset it that way, bang. And now we're back to a blank recovery key. And there you go. Back to the initial setup. So that is all the normal usage. Let's have a look at some more nerdy stuff like DIY, open source, and GitHub. So one of the things I was keen to see with this Ledger recovery key is whether I could build and flash the applet just onto a DIY Java card, just like this one used for Sato chip DIY. And I've done a number of videos on these DIY Sato chip options in the past. And if you jump over to Ledger's GitHub, you can actually see the source code for the Ledger recovery key. It's actually all there on their GitHub. And the instructions on how to, clone that source and actually build a cap file that you could theoretically flash onto a Java card is actually quite straightforward, and it just kind of works. So unfortunately, while it is quite straightforward to build the applet that would run on the Java card, I was actually quite impressed at the way they've just got this sort of turnkey process to do that. To do anything more with that applet in terms of either running tests on it using the Docker environment that their GitHub talks about, or flashing to an actual Java card, I couldn't get either of those things to work. Unfortunately, the test environment that would load this up in a simulator and run some tests on it is not publicly accessible and won't work unless you're, working at Ledger and run it on their network, presumably. And the other challenge here is that the Java card that they have actually used is quite a bit newer than the J3R180 smart cards that you can use with Sato chip DIY, or especially the J3H145. And basically what that means is there are some features that are being used in the Javacard OS on here that are not available on these cards, so they will not work. And the other thing that would pretty much make DIY a non-starter for these Ledger devices is all of the attestation stuff that happens in the factory, where basically these cards are programmed in a way that lets you prove that this device came from Ledger's official factory. And the fact of the matter is, when this device goes to talk to here, if it does not see that this is a genuine Ledger device, this is probably not going to talk to it anyway, which is exactly what you would expect for this kind of setup. And the last thing I'll mention here is licensing. And then we need to be really clear that even though this source code is on GitHub, this license actually means that it is actually not open source in any meaningful way. In that basically the reason this code is made available is pretty much for, audit and review. And you're actually not even allowed, by my reading of this, to run this source code on your own DIY hardware. It can only be used on Ledger hardware. And this is one of those instances where even though the source is available, you don't have the ability to actually prove what is running on this device. You can't build the firmware and flash it on there yourself or anything else like that. Essentially, we're just taking Ledger's word for it, which again, is their business model. One of the other things I'll just quickly mention on the nerd stuff front is that the really interesting thing about these recovery keys is that they are actually firmware updatable. And if we have a look at the app database for Ledger Live, we actually see there is a recovery key updater template that's actually already there. So Ledger is already ready to roll in terms of future updates to fix any potential bugs or perhaps even improve the features on these recovery key cards. Definitely something a bit unique and distinctive in that just about every other smart card based offering in the entire market is not updatable at all. They come with a firmware from the factory and that is it. You are stuck with it, potential bugs and all. Okay, so the last thing we'll do is just see if we can find out anything else useful from it using Global Platform Pro. Alright, so basic check number one, the device is locked, which again, it really should be for any retail device, so that is good. And this just tells us a little bit about the version of things like Global Platform and Javacard that's running on there, as well as the capabilities. So there you go, that is the recovery key from Ledger. Certainly a big step in the right direction, particularly compared to things like their cloud Ledger Recover service. And definitely something that can help fix some gaps in terms of how you securely store things like your seed phrase, particularly if you're wanting to store it in locations that are not secure themselves. If you want to store it with other people and only do things like maybe give them the PIN later, like after you die or if something happens to you, or just even basic stuff like being able to travel with these. And obviously something like this is not as discreet as something like a SIM card running SeedKeeper or something like that. It's still a lot better and more durable than something like a full hardware wallet. Definitely a great addition to the Ledger lineup. It's a fairly reasonable cost, and it's great that it's something that will be bundled with all Ledger Flex and Stax devices going forward. And again, for me, as someone who spends a lot of time helping people who've messed up their backups, it's always good to see options where people can create redundant backups, especially in a way that makes it hard to do things like make a typo as long as you don't forget that PIN. So definitely something to complement your existing written physical backups, not something to just replace completely. Because again, if you forget your PIN with these smart cards, that's it. You can't recover anything else off there. If you think a Ledger recovery key would help boost the security of your setup, want to help me out in the process, I've got an affiliate link in the description. Likewise, if you have any questions about the Ledger recovery key or any comments or experiences using it, just leave a reply in the comments. I'll do my best to reply to all of them. Other than that, stay safe. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. Hit like if you think that other people would find this video useful, and hit subscribe if you'd like to be kept in the loop about future content I make that helps people stay safe in the crypto space and to recover if they get into trouble. If you have any questions about this video or a topic that you'd like me to cover, just leave a reply.